Hello, my name is Brandy Williams and I am the Director of Education here at MOCSA. Even though we can't be face-to-face and share our lunch, I'm thankful that we still have this virtual option to share a meal together. You being here means that you are dedicated to helping MOCSA continue our mission of supporting survivors of sexual assault and also preventing violence in our communities. I just wanted to say thank you very much, and all of your support is very appreciated.
Hello, we're the Emmets. I'm John and my wife Julianne.
Hi.
So Julianne and myself have 6 children, and we've had foster children as well. That we felt we were expert in the world of parenting. We felt we'd seen
Not anymore.
No, we felt we'd seen everything and done everything. And when our youngest guy was 4 years old, we adopted him, and he had a lot of questions and trauma that we didn't have the answers and didn't know where to find them. And that led us on a journey to MOCSA.
MOCSA was really great. They helped us through group therapy, and then we went on to some individual therapy sessions, which was really helpful. It helped our whole family actually to heal and know how to help our little guy. But I will never forget one day going in to help him write a letter. He was trying to apologize to the person who had taken his innocence, and I can tell you from this mama heart, that is so hard because you want to protect your children. But through that, he learned that it was not his fault and that he was safe and loved and cared for. And he's doing really well. Our family has healed a lot, and we're so grateful to MOCSA for that and for all the other children who have been helped because of this amazing program. We hope that you will continue to support families and children who need this healing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome to MOCSA Luncheon 2020. It's been an honor to co-chair the luncheon with my friend Nola Adebo, even though it didn't go quite as we planned.
We're glad you're all here to join us in support of the incredible work MOCSA does in the Kansas City community. Thank you.
It's Kristen. I'm a therapist at MOCSA. Welcome to my home. I wanted to let you know that the program is going to start soon, but I wanted to hop on and tell you all thank you so much for being here. In all fairness, I do always love my job, and I always think I have the coolest job all the time, but there really is something super special about this time. So right now we're providing all telehealth. And so what that means is that I'm getting to work with clients at their home. So I'm getting to see adults' artwork that has helped them heal. I'm getting to see favorite stuffed animals, meet siblings, see a stuffed animal that helps a child sleep well at night. It has been really sacred getting to witness clients healing right now in their own space. And a reason that I'm getting to do that and that all of us therapists are getting to do that is because of people like you. So from your home to my home to the homes of the community where we are getting to watch people get better, you're really making a difference. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Kate with MOCSA. At MOCSA, we train community members like you who want to volunteer to support sexual assault survivors. Whether it's in hospital rooms, answering our hotline, or providing safety education in schools, MOCSA ensures that the Kansas City community has trained volunteers who are ready to respond across the metro to support survivors 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Thank you for joining us in our mission to support survivors.
A couple weeks ago, I was answering the crisis line and received a call from a young man who was translating for his mother, who speaks Spanish. They were interested in getting his 6-year-old sister connected with a therapist. I asked if he and his mother were also interested in getting connected to therapy, because we know sexual abuse impacts the whole family. He let me know that they'd applied for crime victims compensation, but weren't sure they were going to get it. Because of that, they didn't think they could afford therapy for all 3 of them and wanted to prioritize his sister. I let him know that MOCSA services are offered at no cost, and he was so relieved. He let me know that yes, he and his mother are both interested in counseling. I was also happy to let him know that we have Spanish-speaking therapists, so translation would not be a concern. As a MOCSA staff person, it's easy for me to take for granted that people know all of our services are offered at no cost to the community. But it's your support that makes that happen. Your support allows us to provide care to survivors and their families at no cost to them. Your support is what allows us to recruit and retain bilingual staff so we can provide Spanish-speaking services directly. Thank you for all you do to support survivors in our community.
Hi everybody, I'm so glad you're here today. Even though we may not be sharing a table, I just want you to know that your support really makes a big difference to our community. Thank you so much for being here, and please visit moxa.org to donate.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Reed.
And I'm Eric Berger, and we're 2 of the Community Support Committee co-chairs for this year's MOCSA Luncheon.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us and learn more about MOCSA and the excellent programs and services that they offer.
And we know that 2020 has been a crazy year, but now more than ever, your support is needed. We greatly appreciate you being at today's luncheon.
Hello, I'm Katie Campbell, one of the Community Support co-chairs. And on behalf of my husband Jared and I, with Kimberly and Eric, we want to thank you for being here with us today. And even though we cannot be together, we can raise our voices in unison in support of those who are victims of sexual assault and violence. Your presence with us makes a difference and a huge impact on the lives of those affected by sexual assault through therapeutic services, our crisis hotline, counseling, community outreach, and the education supports. So please visit moxa.org to donate, and have a great afternoon.
Hi, MOCSA friends. This is Cassie Sands. I'm the Vice President of Development at MOCSA, and just so grateful to have you here today. We can't wait to share our keynote speaker, Kristen Gibbons Feden, and our survivor speaker, Jessi Bixler. Both of these women are going to share really powerful stories that I think will inform and enlighten and inspire you about the work that we do and why MOCSA's mission is so important now more than ever before. While it's a little bit of a bummer that we can't all be in the same room together and feel the energy of 1,200 people all supporting this mission, and the food is probably a little better than my sad desk yogurt for today, we're all safe at home or safe wherever we are, and we really hope in the next year that we'll be able to be together. So we appreciate your time today. We're so honored that you chose to join us and chose to support us. If you're a new friend or a current supporter, either way, we're just glad you're here. So have a great day, and I hope you enjoyed the event.
Hi everybody, I'm Josh King. I serve as a Director of Grant Development at MOCSA. I'm honored to get to be a part of the work that we do every day at our agency, and I'm also honored to be joined by you today for lunch. If you haven't yet, try the sandwiches. They're great. But seriously, thank you for being here, and thank you for your donations, and thank you for the partnership that you provide to help serve victims and their families in our community. I'll raise my mason jar to your health. Stay well, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in 2021, hopefully in person. Thanks again.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Josh Rowland, Board Chair of MOCSA, the Metropolitan Organization to Counter Sexual Assault.
And I'm Julie Donelon, President and CEO of MOCSA. We're so glad that you could join us today for MOCSA's 26th Annual Community Luncheon. While we'd rather be filling the ballroom at the Marriott downtown, we thank you for tuning in today to support MOCSA. As the only rape crisis center in the Kansas City metro area, MOCSA's mission is to improve the lives of those impacted by sexual abuse and assault and to prevent sexual violence in our community. As you may know, all of MOCSA's services are completely free of charge. Today's event raises awareness for our cause and critical funding so that MOCSA can continue to deliver our programs at no cost. All of this is possible because of the commitment and support of our sponsors and donors today. We're grateful for your generosity.
2020 has been a strange year for many reasons. 6 months ago, this kind of virtual event might have seemed odd, but by now, we're all pretty much pros at doing it virtually. You may be at home now with your kids or spouse on the couch, eating lunch at your desk, and based on all the Zoom calls and the WebExes and the Google Meets I've been on, you've probably got a dog in your lap or a cat about to walk across your keyboard. And even though we aren't in the same room, we want to say we are together. Because MOCSA's mission is powerful. It's so powerful that it doesn't need a ballroom or a fancy lunch to feel it. Though we do love those fancy lunches and getting dressed up and seeing each other, the power of MOCSA's mission is right here today because you're here. It's here as you listen to the stories that our keynote speaker and survivor volunteer will share. It's right here as we learn more about our roles in helping end sexual violence. Because MOCSA is more than one day and one event. It's about lasting cultural change. It's about the momentum of change that we have started, and carrying it forward, we will bring it home together.
So we look forward to sharing the next hour together with you, but this year from places all over the country. Every day, MOCSA advocates meet survivors at hospitals. Our educators lead prevention classes with students in schools. Volunteers answer the crisis line calls from one of the 6 counties that we serve. MOCSA is serving thousands all over the Kansas City metro, right in the neighborhoods that you're joining us from today.
And for those of you who are tuning in today as someone's guest, or as someone who doesn't yet know much about MOCSA, I hope you'll be inspired by what you hear in the next hour and choose to become a supporter. We invite you to visit moxa.org or text MOCSA to 76278 to make your gift. We're excited to share that your donation is twice as powerful today because we have a challenge match of $10,000. Thanks to Lucy and Fred Colson and Graham Hunt, your donation is doubled today. It's up to all of us to meet their challenge match, and I know we can do it. Now, we want to take a quick moment to thank the dedicated leaders of today's luncheon. First, our honorary chairs, Jill and Ray Kowalik. This luncheon has seen incredible support this year because of their leadership and their hard work. Thank you both. And our event underwriters, Burns and McDonnell, with Ray's leadership as president and CEO, has shared their generous support from the company and their board and staff. And Jennifer and Chuck Lau. Jennifer, a MOCSA board member, and Chuck have been underwriters for this luncheon for several years now. We appreciate your continued commitment to MOCSA and thank you for your generosity.
We would also like to thank the dedicated team that has worked hard to put this event together. Our event co-chairs, Polly Kramer and Nola Adebo, our community support co-chairs, Eric Bergrud and Kimberly Reed, and Jared and Katie Campbell, the volunteer members of the Community Support Committee and Event Planning Committees, and the Johnson County Advisory Council. Signal Theory, who once again developed the engaging promotional materials for today's luncheon, the development team at MOCSA, including Sandra Williams, Josh King, Amanda Crane, Debbie Friedrichsen, Kate Schwaller, and our Vice President of Development, Cassie Sands. And MOCSA's Board of Directors for their support of not only this event, but their year-round commitment to ensuring that MOCSA has the resources necessary to achieve our mission. These supporters contributed hundreds of hours to make this successful event, and we appreciate their dedication. So thank you all. Now, let's get on with the program.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, though I'm sorry we can't be together in person. My wife, Jill, and I are grateful to serve as honorary chairs for this year's community luncheon. And we are thankful so many of you have joined us today to recognize the important work that MOCSA is achieving in the Kansas City community. As president and CEO of Burns McDonnell, we are proud to partner with MOCSA in their efforts to provide hope and healing for survivors of sexual abuse and assault, and to support MOCSA's mission of countering sexual assault through prevention and education. MOCSA provides counseling and advocacy services for more than 1,000 survivors from around the Kansas City area each year. And over a third of those survivors are children. With your donation made today, MOCSA's expert staff can continue to provide these services completely free of charge. Last year, MOCSA reached more than 65,000 people through education and outreach. MOCSA's message is clear. Sexual violence is never okay. It is never the victim's fault. Victims can tell someone, and there are resources available that can help them become survivors. MOCSA staff offers innovative programming, now both in person and virtually. MOCSA's youth education programs teach the fundamentals of healthy relationships and the changes we need to make to put an end to sexual harassment and violence in our communities. Jill and I sincerely appreciate you joining today, and we hope you will continue to support the essential work that MOCSA does for the Kansas City community. And to kick off the luncheon, Jill, myself, and our board of directors at Burns & Mac are proud to support MOCSA with a $25,000 personal contribution. Thank you, and let's make this a great event.
Thank you, Jill and Ray, for your generous gift, and to the board of directors at Burns & McDonnell for your support of MOCSA. We can't thank you enough for your partnership and commitment to survivors and to our mission.
Now we'd like to share a video and a speech from MOCSA board member and volunteer Jessi Bixler. Jessi has a personal perspective on MOCSA's mission that we think is so important for you to hear today.
I remember coming up to these doors and the doors open and we walked a few steps in and I remember just stopping there, and it's almost like it was in slow motion and watching it, from a camera up above, looking down in the lobby. And I remember seeing people sitting over there, and I remember their eyes looking at me. And I remember pulling my coat around me because I felt such shame. And I was confused. And it was at that moment I thought, I am one of those people that is at a hospital at 12 o'clock.
Every year, more than 750 individuals go to hospital emergency rooms throughout the community for a forensic exam following a sexual assault. But what we know is that's only a fraction of the total number of survivors of sexual abuse and assault in our community, because many will never report it to the police or even go to the hospital.
She told me that a volunteer would be coming from MOCSA, and she would be coming to just be there with me and answer any questions. She brought a bag, and she set it beside me.
The bag that we give to survivors not only has the tangible things that they need in the moment, but it really is a lifeline to MOCSA services, so they can reach out at any time.
And so the nurse told me that unfortunately I wouldn't be able to go home with my clothes. So within the contents of this bag were underwear and shirts and some sweatpants. So after my dad brought me home from the hospital, I showered, and the clothes that were in the bag, I immediately threw them in the trash. I couldn't be rid of them soon enough. I went back to the bag and opened the bag to get the medication that I was given by the nurse. In addition is when I saw the books and the pamphlets that were inside the bag.
MOCSA has a variety of different services that we provide to survivors to help them in their journey, from our counseling services for them or their loved ones to our advocacy services.
She had also suggested that I seek some group therapy or some expert training in that field. And so that was the next time that I came in contact with MOCSA. And it was so validating because I learned so much about the things that I was experiencing. 6 years later, as a board member, I can tell you that there will still be times as part of my journey where I need MOCSA and so many other people need MOCSA. My gosh, what a tremendous impact MOCSA has on our community. In the video you just watched, I talked about walking into the hospital filled with confusion and shame. I admit, at that time, I thought rape was something that happened to other people. What I know now, and what I want you to know, is rape and sexual assault can happen anywhere to anyone. It doesn't know economic or racial barriers. It's most often not committed by a stranger in a dark alley. But similar to what happened to me right before I walked through those doors on the day of my daughter's first birthday party. Just a few hours earlier, I was looking forward to climbing into bed, exhausted from weeks of planning and a day full of entertaining. After falling asleep, I awoke feeling what I assumed to be my husband's hands on my body. I began to hear a little voice in my head repeating, "Those aren't his hands, those aren't his hands, those aren't his hands." I felt paralyzed and completely terrified. It was when he forced himself onto me and began to have sex with me, I realized this was not my husband. I managed to roll out of bed and walk down the hallway, through the living room where just hours before we opened presents, and through the kitchen where we sang happy birthday, and finally I reached the patio door. I opened the door and began to scream, "It wasn't your hands, it wasn't your hands." My body was shaking so violently that my husband rushed to see what was happening. My parents awoke to the sound of my screams, only to find me in my husband's arms, wearing no pants and no underwear. As they reached us, they also saw this family member exiting our room, adjusting his clothing. The rest of the evening comes to me in flashes, curling on the bathroom floor, dry heaving, frantically stripping the sheets off of my bed, trembling while the police handcuffed this man, the out-of-body feeling riding to the hospital, the flash of the nurse examiner's camera as she collected evidence, police officers asking if I want to press charges, requesting a protection order while standing next to the man that violated me just weeks earlier. 7 years have passed, and I've learned many things since then. Like when you're asked if you want to press charges, ultimately, it's not up to you. After a series of meetings with the prosecutor, we were informed that they would not be pursuing criminal charges. They did not feel like they had enough evidence to prove the family member intended to rape me. I also learned that the trauma I experienced caused lasting triggers, or something that makes me flash back to that night. In 1 month, my daughter will turn 8. Every year we continue to celebrate her and try not to let that trigger impact her special day. Each day is hard, and I'm not always as strong as I'd like to be. But I believe in the strides we are making to increase awareness, provide education, and build a culture that no longer teaches women how to avoid being raped, but rather teach people not to rape. It's important that you know, just participating in this luncheon, you are part of the conversation, impacting the lives of men, women, and children who also want to feel safe and strong again. But today, we're asking you to do more. Through your financial donations, you can help survivors feel like themselves again. MOCSA services are offered all free of charge, so please make a gift from wherever you are sitting right now.
Your donations today are doubled through our generous match donors, Lucy and Fred Colson. Thank you once again for your support.
Jessi, thank you so much for sharing your story and taking such a devastating and traumatic event and using it to benefit so many survivors.
Thank you, Jessi, for your bravery and honesty and for your role as a MOCSA board member. And now, Julie and I are thrilled to introduce you to our keynote speaker this afternoon. While you won't have the opportunity to hear her speech in person this year, we invite you to share your questions with her in the chat box on the right of the screen. She'll be answering as many as she can during the keynote and the post-show program. So please join in. Named one of the top 40 under 40 by the Philadelphia Business Journal, Kristen Gibbons Feden is a distinguished lawyer, best known for her role as Assistant District Attorney in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, where she served as the prosecutor in the trial and retrial of Bill Cosby. She has also served the community as a prosecutor in the Trials Division, Domestic Violence, Elder Abuse, and Sex Crimes units. Over the course of her tenure in the District Attorney's Office, Kristen prosecuted a wide variety of criminal cases, ranging in seriousness, including homicides, rapes, crimes against children, aggravated assaults, burglaries, elder financial exploitation crimes, and more. Along with many notable awards, Kristen was named the American Lawyers Litigator of the Week in 2018, recognized as one of 2017 lawyers on the fast track, and earned commendations from the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office and the Upper Merion Police Department. Currently, Kristen concentrates her practice on complex commercial litigation, education law, employment and labor, and white-collar defense. She is a passionate advocate for victims of all ages and the proud mother of 2 boys and wife of Nicholas Feden Sr. Please join us in welcoming Kristen Gibbons Feden.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to speak to you today. And I can't tell you how much I wish we could all be together on this occasion. You know, my favorite part of speaking is definitely not giving the speech. It's the community building before and after. When I'm not behind a podium and you're not sitting in the audience. It's when we're together, sharing our experiences, laughing together, and learning from each other, growing stronger together. I have no doubt that we'll be able to return to that soon. Not soon enough, but soon. In the meantime, we will continue to grow the strength of our movement, both in numbers and spirit. And we are a movement. The creation of MOCSA 45 years ago is one of those seminal moments where a group of dedicated people from various disciplines joined together with one mission: to help survivors of sexual assault. What you created in Kansas City nearly a half a century ago laid the groundwork for what has become the modern movement of survivor empowerment. Some call it the Me Too movement, and I do too sometimes, for shorthand, but in reality, it's too big, too powerful to be captured under any one label. It's a movement of courageous survivors of sexual assault, finding strength in communities that were difficult to build prior to social media, who are literally revolutionizing our society from the boardrooms to the back rooms, from the church to the courts, from top to bottom and inside out. They're shining a light on predatory behaviors that needed darkness to survive. This is happening every day and everywhere. If this movement is part of our mission, we will all find a role to play. My role is to support survivors who come forward and to help them find justice in the courts. But my role doesn't end there, because a survivor of sexual assault can't find justice in a court of law unless a jury of their peers, 12 random people plucked from their county, can navigate through the deep-rooted rape myths that have long served as a barrier for justice. These 12 random people are ultimately responsible for finding which facts are true and which are not. These 12 random people are ultimately responsible for deciding who is telling the truth and who is not. These 12 random people are here today in this room and listening at home. And so while my role as an advocate for survivors of sexual assault takes place largely in the courthouse, it also extends outside of it to these discussions where we work together to destroy rape myths and change our culture so that when a survivor turns to the courts for justice, the 12 random people will see them for who they are and understand the reality of what they've endured and not measure them against the unreality of rape myths. So today, we're going to dismantle those rape myths together. We'll discuss the prosecution of William Cosby and look at how rape myths played a central role in that case, just as they do in most cases of sexual assault. And I hope that by the end of the discussion, anyone who has any vestiges of rape mythology still holding them back has been freed from them, and in turn, feels ready to help free another. Let me first give you a little personal and historical context for this discussion. I didn't become an attorney to be a prosecutor, and my start as a prosecutor did not involve me working with victims or survivors of sexual assault. My path hasn't always been straight. Sometimes you find your path while you get your footing. My undergraduate degree from Lafayette College was actually in neuroscience, and my first job out of college was in finance with Bloomberg in New York City. I left finance to attend Temple University Beasley School of Law in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where I met my husband, and we then settled down in the suburb of Philadelphia. I, as you can tell, am African American and have been my entire life, as has my father and my mother. My father was an African American man and a graduate of Central High School, a prominent school in Philadelphia, who then went on to become a physician. I give you this background because it's important that you understand that my family, my school, and my community are all the central locus for those who worship at the altar of William Cosby. William Cosby was a trustee of Temple University, a great benefactor of Central High School, the lodestar for African American men, especially those in the medical profession. There was nothing in my DNA to make me distrust William Cosby. And I'd bet that those sentiments echoed those of African Americans and people from other cultures alike. However, the period of 2014 to 2015, specifically the summer of 2015, while not changing my DNA, did transform the lens through which I and most people viewed William Cosby. During that time period, two conflicting things were occurring surrounding William Cosby. One, he was traveling the country, as some put it, lecturing African Americans about how to be respectable and casting blame onto young blacks' manner of dress for disproportionate police attention. He was criticizing the role of single mothers in the Black community. These are sensitive topics, and whatever your opinion on his opinions, what is relevant here was that he was positioning himself as an old guard, offering moral guidance to those in the Black community, many of whom didn't believe they needed it. And some specifically felt that to the extent that they did, he shouldn't be the messenger. Why? Because at the same time, numerous women were coming forward with accounts of sexual assault and rape, decades-long accusations, including rape as drug-facilitated sexual assault. And these claims ranged over several decades. And as Hannibal Buress, a local Black comedian, famously summarized the feeling of the growing number of people in the Black community, and I quote, "He gets on TV, pull up your pants, Black people. I was on TV in the 80s. I can talk down to you because I had a successful sitcom. Yeah, well, you raped women, Bill Cosby, so turn the crazy down a couple notches." Yet regardless of how Buress, how simply he summed it up, race and justice are never simple in the United States. Whatever shift in the feelings towards Cosby may have been occurring during this time, in the background was the common agreement within the Black community of the reality of institutional and systemic racism and the treatment of Blacks especially Black men in the criminal justice system. Both before and after his trials, Cosby's team would lean on the imagery of Emmett Till and the history of Black legal persecution to shroud their client. Unfortunately, the history of our nation provided no shortage of cover for them. Our history is replete with the most violent and explicit examples of individual and systemic racism. Lynching of Black Americans was a common practice in the late 19th and early 20th century, and noose imagery remains today a way of attempting to intimidate and terrorize Black Americans. Being the accused in the court of law is no strange place for the Black man. Yet in Cosby's case, the reality was so much more entangled. Behind the scene of Andrea, a female white accuser, and Cosby, the Black accused, were Black women. Half of the prior bad act witnesses, Black women who were finally getting their day in court. The defense never talked about them because they didn't fit neatly square with the defense narrative. These were Black women, strong Black women, experiencing extreme persecution at the hands of Cosby's team. But Andrea's victory was theirs too. I'll say this and move on. Reform is necessary at all levels of our justice system to acknowledge both the history and racial persecution, as well as its continuance. That reform must be significant and it must happen now. With that said, William Cosby was not persecuted by the legal system. He was prosecuted because he was a serial rapist who admitted in a federal deposition he never believed would see the light of day, that he gave quaaludes to young women that he intended to have sex with. And when the federal judge released those previously sealed deposition excerpts and the deposition was released, the country, and in fact the world, was shocked. Here was Bill Cosby attempting to obtain drugs for the sole purpose of giving them to a woman he wanted to have sex with. After the release of those depositions, new life was given to those multiple accusers and their stories. The veil of Dr. Huxtable drooped, if not completely dropped, from the face of William H. Cosby. But what could become of it? There still remained a barrier. Most, if not all of the claims multiple news outlets reported were barred by statute of limitations. Perhaps he'd never work again, but would there be any legal consequences? Well, as it turned out, not all of the statute of limitations had run. The statute of limitation for sexual assault in Pennsylvania was 12 years. And in January of 2004, Andrea Constan, a part of the Temple University basketball program, had reported a year later, in 2005, that Cosby had sexually assaulted her in his Cheltenham, Pennsylvania home. The district attorney at the time, Bruce Castor, had chosen not to pursue charges. He had the discretion to make that decision. And while there are plenty of people, me, with plenty of reasons to second guess him, I won't play that role today. After then DA Castor declined to criminally prosecute William Cosby, Ms. Constan pursued and received a settlement in a civil suit against him and returned home to her home country of Canada. And remember, this is still the early to mid 2000s. So at the time of the assault, her assault, and even her report, William Cosby and Dr. Huxtable were indistinguishable. William Cosby was thought to be as wholesome and transparent, really, as the Jell-O he used to advertise. And for most people, inside and outside of law enforcement, William Cosby was incapable of jaywalking, much less committing sexual assault. So now fast forward to the summer of 2015. 11 years and some months had passed since the assault and 10 years since the report. Ms. Constan stood as perhaps the only Cosby accuser whose case was not barred by the statute of limitations. Her assault had taken place in our county, and time was almost up. It was then that I was called into the district attorney's office and asked if I'd be willing to review the evidence and travel to Canada to meet with Ms. Constant personally to determine if her case should be prosecuted and if she'd be willing to cooperate. And I told the district attorney that I would. And you know, we all have impressions of people when we first meet them. My first impression of Andrea or Miss Constant was that she was both genuine and kind. Two very important humane characteristics, but hardly enough to determine whether or not to prosecute. And one aspect of Miss Constant, which was very different from many of the other sexual assault survivors I had worked with over the course of those years, was that so much time had passed between her report. And Miss Constant was in a very different place than most of the survivors that I meet, both mentally and physically. However, as I took the time to listen to her and discuss the events, the horrific events of 2004, I was able to identify many of the characteristics of an individual who had experienced a significant trauma. Most notable was the inclusion of numerous facts, facially unhelpful to her case, and perhaps part of the reason charges were not filed in 2005. Yet her honest inclusion of such facts were part of what helped me find her and so many other survivors so credible. She had trouble recalling the exact date of the assault, though she was able to determine a definite time frame. The morning after the assault, she ate a muffin that Cosby gave her in his home before leaving. She stayed in contact with Cosby for a few months following the assault. And there were other aspects of her account where the facts differed in various retellings. I could have walked away from the case. And in fact, these quote-unquote so-called problems with her story are likely the reason charges weren't not pressed in 2005. But what I heard from Andrea was an honest and best attempt at an explanation of a significantly traumatic experience. Her account demonstrated many of the characteristics of survivors of sexual assault and was indicative of someone who had experienced a traumatic event. Yet these same characteristics, indicative of victimization, are what law enforcement attorneys, including prosecutors and others, have historically used to demonstrate untrustworthiness or unreliability. There are studies available in which police officers have described their expectations for interviews with victims of rape and sexual assault. They've expressed the expectation that a real victim would stick rigidly to their story, while a false accusation might change or involve impossible facts. Well, in a Washington Post survey of the numerous studies of police investigatory techniques into sexual assaults, it was discovered that not only were these techniques ineffective, but could actually be counterproductive and harmful. A study of the LAPD documented the officers explaining to researchers that their goal was to have the complainant write it down, get them caught in discrepancies, and have them tell the story left, right, and center. These methods can have the effect of leading to a conclusion that a victim of sexual assault is lying, when they're not. These methods also, understandably, have a chilling effect on reporting, and even giving the survivor the courage to follow through with charges after an initial investigation. Why use techniques that are not only ineffective, but counterproductive? Well, this is the effect of rape mythology. Society, inclusive of the law enforcement community, and even survivors, have often accepted many non-evidence-based assumptions regarding rape, sexual assault, harassment, and other forms of sexual violence. These assumptions not only lack evidence, but they're actually false. These fallacies are collectively and colloquially termed rape myths. And what are common rape myths? To answer that question, I'm going to turn to the work of Dr. Barbara Ziv, one of the leading experts on the dynamics of sexual violence, and the expert who testified at the second Cosby trial and at the Weinstein trial. Let me first lay a foundation for visualizing rape myths with a generic set of facts. A woman dressed in less than modest wear is out in an unfamiliar place when a terrifying stranger physically overpowers her and sexually assaults her. That woman, distraught and broken, immediately calls the police and recounts to them her horrifying experience. Forensic evidence is collected for a rape kit. And on the basis of such evidence, the man is convicted at trial and justice has been served. The end. How many of you think this is the typical account of sexual violence? How many of you expect a majority of the facts in that vignette that I just recited to be true? While many of you in this room may not be hampered by rape myths, I'm sure there are some in your network and community who believe that this generic set of facts that I just recited is the norm. And while facts like this can unfortunately happen, it also fits the general popular mythology of rape and sexual assault. While neat and tidy and in some ways reasonable and logical, the story above lacks two necessary ingredients for a majority of survivors: humanity and truth. In fact, the story that I just recited above, it's replete with the type of mythology that permeates, explicitly or implicitly, American popular and legal culture, even today, after all the work we've done. Let's start with the terrifying stranger. One myth implicated is that sexual assault is perpetrated by someone who is a stranger to the victim. False. The research shows that less than 14% of rapes in this country are committed by a stranger. 85% are committed by someone that the victim knows, whether a family member, significant other, someone in a position of authority over them, or an acquaintance. But think about the difference, emotionally and socially. The deeper the ties between the victim and the perpetrator, consider the greater confusion and complexity of emotions. In the case of Andrea and William Cosby, he was a mentor, a major benefactor of the program that she worked for, and a larger-than-life figure. Not only did she know and trust her assaulter, Andrea's ability to perform her job required his continuing goodwill. And what about reporting? The woman in our generic set of facts immediately called the police to report her assault. Isn't that reasonable? If you came home and your house was burglarized, wouldn't you call the police? Of course you would. When you get into a fender bender, don't you call the police while the cars are still warm? This is what we do. Something bad happens, you document it. You call the police. You don't wait. If someone would do this for the loss of a possession or damage to their vehicle, of course they'd do it if they were raped or sexually assaulted, even more so, right? False. This is actually two myths rolled up in one. First, that rape and sexual assault will be reported. The United States Bureau of Justice statistics describes rape as the most underreported crime. Studies suggest that somewhere between 5 and 30% of sexual assaults are reported to police. Therefore, the vast majority of survivors do not report their sexual assault to the police. In fact, studies suggest that they don't even report to anyone, clergy, doctors, or any other mandated reporters. The vast majority will not call the police. That is research-based evidence, not myth. But notice that our mythological rape victim not only called the police, she did so immediately. Another myth. Of those who do report, delayed reporting is the norm, not the exception. And when I say delayed reporting, that can mean anything from days, weeks, months, or even years. Sexual assault and rape are confusing to the survivor, not only because of the trauma, but also because of the shame and the complexity of emotions involved. The New York Times recently quoted the president of RAINN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, as saying that the first question asked by many people who call that national hotline is, was I raped? Being raped or sexually assaulted can take time to process and time to address. And as the evidence shows, the time to process and address this can sometimes take days, months, years, or even decades. And did you catch that our mythological woman was less than moderately dressed? Now we know what that means, of course. She was wearing a skirt that ended above her ankles, or a shirt with something less than a turtleneck. Why even mention it? Well, because part of the mythology of rape involves significant questioning of the dress and activity of the survivor, far past the relevant question of whether or not he or she consented. During the course of the trial against William Cosby, as well as numerous trials that I've prosecuted, whether or not the woman had had a drink or two, or was wearing provocative clothing, or had been known to have sex with other men, was thought to be a relevant question in regards to whether or not the sexual activity on that specific night in question was consensual. In fact, in her closing argument, one of the Cosby attorneys denigrated each prior bad act witness who testified against her client, stating that one of the witnesses had even slept with every man in the universe. Every man in the universe? Certainly not a fact found in evidence, but certainly irrelevant, and certainly a despicable thing, but irrelevant to whether or not that woman had been sexually assaulted. Yet something people take into account in order to discredit a sexual assault survivor. In fact, one of the jurors in the first trial questioned Miss Constand's choice of clothing and what it suggested about her desire to have sex with William Cosby. This myth can be the most devastating because many people, men and women, internalize it and blame and fault themselves for being sexually assaulted. Dr. Ziv at trial offered the following antidote as an example. She told the story of a woman who had come to her after being raped. The woman had been put into a cab by her friends at college, completely passed out, and the cab driver raped her and dumped her naked body onto the street. When the woman came to Dr. Ziv, she expressed that it was her fault that this had happened. Did she consent to having sex? No. Rape and sexual assault cannot be measured like negligence. The self-blame that people experience is compounded by the fact I discussed earlier that most perpetrators are someone known to the victim. This often leaves the victim with a cognitive dissonance where they struggle to reconcile how someone they knew, someone they respected, maybe even loved, could sexually assault them. And as if these factors alone weren't enough, many of these survivors find it difficult, if not impossible, to comprehend and communicate in any discernible way the full facts of the assault, specifically the surrounding context. And why? Well, because there's another factor at work here that's really crucial for you to understand. There's a neuropsychological phenomenon that affects sexual assault and rape victims that further undermines their ability to proceed in that neat, orderly, and reasonable way that our mythological rape victim did. When an individual experiences an intense trauma, such as rape or sexual assault, but really even something like as severe as a car accident, their brain is susceptible to the effects of that trauma. And although I disclose in my degrees in neuroscience, I'm not qualified by any means to discuss the neuroscientific explanations. However, in brief, the effects of a trauma can result in the overproduction of a stress hormone, cortisol. And it's theorized through studies that it results in the atrophy of the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for recording memories. In this practice, this can result in disorganized and disassociated thinking around the events of the trauma. And ladies and gentlemen, this has been known for decades. In even a 20-year-old study with the Washington Post, they noted, and I quote, rape memories were rated as less clear and vivid, less visually detailed, less likely to occur in a meaningful order, less well-remembered, less talked about, and less frequently recalled either voluntarily or involuntarily, with less sensory components, including sound, smell, and taste. In a separate study conducted, Elena Newman of the University of Tulsa explained that, and I quote her, everything around trauma basically comes down to the biological drive. Hence a focus on the source of the threat the attackers, at the expense of what the Washington Post refers to as contextual details, such as the time and place. So with that background, that foundation, let's revisit our mythological victim through an evidentiary and less popular lens. Our victim, don't ask me what she was wearing, doesn't matter, is in the home of a longtime friend and sometimes love interest, sharing some wine. They kiss. She enjoys that. He wants more. She does not. And he proceeds to expose himself to her and force himself on top of her, despite her telling him to stop. She stays the rest of the night, shaken, confused. They eat breakfast in the morning. He laughs. She makes conversation. She leaves. She does not call the police. She does not tell anyone what happened. She begins to suffer from depression and other psychological effects of PTSD. She doesn't understand them. 5 years later, she hears someone on the television talking about a similar situation, and she contacts the police. She can only approximate the date it happened and gets the location of his apartment wrong. No further investigation takes place, and her assaulter continues on with his life. She attempts to do the same. The end? As you can tell, reality is a whole lot messier than mythology. There is a cognitive dissonance that the average person experiences, even trained law enforcement, when trying to fit the chaotic actions, decisions, and explanations of survivors of sexual assault into a neat box bound by mythology on each side. In the case against William Cosby, the defense attorney focused on both of these issues, relying heavily on rape myths to confuse the jury. In her position, managing operations for Temple basketball, Ms. Constant understood that her livelihood depended, in part, on the continued goodwill of one of the program's biggest benefactors, William Cosby. Continued contact is not uncommon, yet it can be used against survivors like Mrs. Constant. In the first trial of William Cosby, the expert on the dynamics of sexual assault testified after Ms. Constant. And it's quite possible, and even likely, that the jury, lacking the necessary understanding of the effects of trauma, still clouded by rape myths, couldn't wrap their head around numerous aspects of Ms. Constant's testimony. Her delay in reporting, staying for breakfast, continued contact, inability to precisely determine the date and time. One juror we know was hung up on what she was wearing and why she'd even go to his house alone. Yet in the second trial, we began with the expert. I directed Dr. Barbara Ziv through the multiple dimensions of trauma-induced symptoms and how they manifested in survivors of sexual assault. We discussed rape myths and made the jury consciously aware of all of their unconscious beliefs. And it's my opinion that this foundation played a large, if not determinative, role in the conviction of William Cosby. Since Cosby's conviction, we've seen other high-profile predators follow him down. While not all of them have yet been convicted, we can already see the readiness on the part of police and prosecutors to wade through the nuanced realities and not get bogged down by the mythology. Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, and Robert Kelly have all seen the inside of a jail cell. Many more are under investigation. The conviction of William Cosby was a proof of concept, proof that long-held rape myths can be replaced with reality, proof that 12 people chosen at random can be trusted to deliver justice to survivors, and proof, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the mission that brought this organization together 45 years ago was not in vain. It may have taken generations, but your work and passion helped to lay the groundwork for the cultural revolution that today is bringing hope and light to survivors everywhere.
That was a powerful speech. Thank you so much, Kristen, for your impressive work as an advocate and leader in this movement. Your work is helping to hold perpetrators accountable and lifting up the voices of survivors.
As Kristen said earlier, with your passion and support, you can help us carry this movement forward and bring hope and light to survivors everywhere. And just a reminder that your gift is doubled today, thanks to our generous Challenge Match donors. Please take a moment to make your donation to MOCSA right now. You can text MOCSA to 76278 or visit moxa.org. Your gift is so important.
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We look forward to seeing you again soon, and hopefully in 2021 it'll be in person.
Thank you, and have a great afternoon.